When Kurt and Blaine came back to that high school, they formed a block that furthered organic change, and that's why they now like Santana even if she's lesbian. We feel that organic change will happen under our paradigm because even if you have to go through that extra step of stress, it will happen. This side of the house can only intervene, but that intervention can go through the most basic things of social interaction when you're with your parents, the household. We feel under our paradigm, their intervention is limited to the extent that they can only intervene in severe circumstances. They're not going to be there in instances when you have to help the children interact with a particular social institution. They're not going to be there to help their children when they're having horrible fights with their parents and being emotionally blackmailed. That's why I have two issues for you today. Firstly, I'll talk to you about gender roles and how our model specifically answers it. Secondly, I'll talk to you about the role of schools and how their policy rather would less incentivize individuals for change. First issue, we feel that regardless of whatever change happens in school, children stay in school most of their time, but the parents still have the final say. Because parents are the ones who are in charge of whatever decisions, or who will basically have the last say to whatever decisions their children make. So we feel if you have a child who openly defies the very social and cultural institution that the parents are trying to preserve, the parents aren't obviously going to say, especially the horrible parents, they aren't going to say that, oh, that's fine, continue. They're going to crack down and make sure their children preserve these values. And we feel on that level, it makes it harder for these children to interact with other individuals from the other side of that social institution. We feel that our paradigm is much better because it allows organic change to occur. If you feel that that change is important, even for these institutions, they can form a trading block, just like Blaine and Kurt did. We think on that level, it allows individuals to be more open, and it allows the parents to realize how stupid they actually were. Because if they see their children are actually suffering and unhappy, then the emotional blackmail is now in favor of the children. We think on that level, it gives them the ability to do that. Yes, Rene?
If the state can disallow public schools from displaying religious icons and observance of religious practices, why can't they do this? Because we think that the state can be the facilitator of that organic change that you're talking about.
For one, it's easier to change your religion than it is to change your gender. We feel on some level gender is a more sensitive issue in terms of that. So we don't think we should leave it to a particular actor to decide in terms of what type of curriculum should be forwarded in all different schools. That's something that my member brilliantly forwarded when he talked about how this is implementing a particular standard by which all schools, communities who may not even relate, have to stick by. And we feel on that level, it makes it much harder for these individuals to interact, because if you have your parents forcing you to be something in your school, forcing you to be another thing, you're then tied by both different social institutions. And we think then this will be much harder for them to make decisions in the future in terms of the groups that they associate themselves with. And we feel that the state can only intervene in instances that are incredibly severe, so that significant number of people aren't saved to the fullest of extents. And we think the bigots will never go away, because you might be targeting a specific sector, yay, the minority, but the bigots will but the culture itself is still preserved, and people will go to the greatest of extents to try and preserve them, which is my second issue, the role of schools. We feel that schools have to try and be as value neutral as possible, and we feel that our issue particularly does that, because what we necessarily try to do is that we give them, because change has already happened. That's why Kurt brought Blake to that prom, even if the school didn't agree. That's why people we slowly have things like anti-bullying laws. But yes, closing.
Sanj, the thing is, your evil parent stance is terribly isolated. The discrimination from parents is also present in your community block idea. How exactly does that work for your case? But we're not dictating to people that they shouldn't be conservative. We're just telling them to accept people who are.
Yeah, I get it. We think when we have schools who actively defy what parents think, chances are they'll be slightly angrier towards the schools. And actually more, we think they'll be much more angry towards the schools and the children themselves. So we feel that obviously they're not going to let their children continue to do this. So the parents are, and we don't feel that they're always in the position to try and change the schools of their children. Rather, they're going to try and change the cultures from the very core and influence the particular lifestyles of their children. So that very little leeway that the children have will be closed down by. And we feel that only closing opposition try to target this particular aspect of society. No, thank you. We feel that when you implement a particular idea that has to appeal to all the different educational sectors, the school necessarily oversteps that boundary of that particular community. And we think that when a community is so tied to its social institutions, it makes it much harder to forward that value in the neutral aspect. Like we think it's incredibly hard to make the liberals do things, make the conservatives do things in the liberal way, and the children to get it the way you want them to. We think that it will make it much harder for these children to integrate in the societies that they want to. Remember, that's why we give them the options in tertiary education. That's why we give them the option to choose. When they're in a position where they're more likely to do so, and their parents won't kill them, won't cut them off, won't threaten them through emotional blackmail to do so. We feel that their policy doesn't necessarily do that because it tells them what is right and what is wrong and actively undermines it through legislation. Blacks eventually got the right to vote. Women eventually, and we did this through gradual change. Like before women had the right to vote, their views had to be recognized first through the ability to talk. And we think that didn't happen right away because you just can't get to the end before you have to get to the middle. We think it's much easier to do that before you slap them right in the face. Because the bigots aren't going to go away if you immediately tell them, no, you can't do anything, you can't do what your culture tells you. You have to do this because you actively try and erase that very value. For all these reasons, we stand for all the children who are emotionally blackmailed by their parents. We stand for the children who are forced to do things because their parents want them to. We feel that their side makes this worse, their side makes those children sad and emo. And for all those reasons, we're more than proud to close.